In my personal opinion, the landscape is already disrupted and it has changed a lot. So you can already see that, right? You can take content creation, financial market analysis, or software development that we do day-to-day basis. I think that is would be AGI, or the artificial general intelligence. We most probably would have heard the news about Sam Altman or OpenAI trying to raise about $500 billion, and then the Stargate projects, which is mainly intended towards having that AI picture. And of course, your LLMs are trained on massive scale of data, as you can, like 7 billion parameters and trillions of tokens, right? And another important aspect is the self-attention and the positional encoding, right? These are two more improvements that was brought in. I think the Gemma model was there for 150 other ethnic languages. So these are some models that is trying to fill the gap with respect to ethnic languages. I think recently there was this news about around 10,000 crore of investment that has been as part of our budget. I think it was the India AI mission, right? So there is a lot of effort that is going in terms of acquiring GPUs, creating data sets for India and Indian languages.
Hey guys, welcome to Better Engineering and Management podcast. Today we have Arun Benoy joining us to discuss how generative AI works, particularly focusing on large language model that is popularly known as LLM. He will also be describing to us why LLM based generative AI can come up with many disruptive business use cases and why founders should start understanding LLMs and start investing into it. Arun, please welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pradeep, for inviting me to your podcast. And hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Arun. I have around 12 plus years of experience, and currently I'm a software architect at Harman. I specialize mainly in scalable and distributed systems and platforms. During the initial years of my career, I was mainly developing IoT based systems, that is, event driven systems, which could potentially connect up to thousands of vehicles and process millions of events in real time. And currently, in my organization, what I do is I lead the enterprise AI initiatives, right? That is developing LLM based applications on top of a scalable LLM ops platform. So that is what I do. I try to ensure that business is able to derive the maximum out of LLM powered applications. So that's a brief about me.
Cool. That's awesome, Arun, because LLMs are the thing of the day, right? In generative AI
Right,
particularly.
right, right.
And so coming to that, Arun, what are some of the practical business use cases which you are aware of where you think LLM can bring a disruptive solution and change the landscape completely?
So, in my personal opinion, the landscape is already disrupted and it has changed a lot. So you can already see that, right? You can take content creation, financial market analysis, or software development that we do day-to-day basis, customer support. Things are changing. Even when I see videos right now, I'm pretty sure, like especially for content creation, I'm sure people are using Stable Diffusion for like generating images, or they could be using Runway ML for their video generation. And of course, like ChatGPT is there to power your scripts and stuff like that. So content creation, I think, has changed a lot. Then similarly, like software development, if you think about GitHub Copilot or Cursor, these are things that as software developers we use on a day-to-day basis, and it has, I think, significantly improved the performance or let's say productivity of software engineers and architects, that thereby to say. So I think now when you are thinking about the future, like what could be the next step, I think that is would be AGI, or the artificial general intelligence. We most probably would have heard the news about Sam Altman or OpenAI trying to raise about $500 billion, and then the Stargate projects, which is mainly intended towards having that AI infrastructure and AGI in place. So
Right.
I think whether will it be a Skynet sort of AGI, we are yet to see. But I think that is the next set of disruption if you want to think about what will be the next.
Interesting. So what I understand is the content creation is something which is already disrupted because of LLMs and ChatGPT. So all the people who are into content creation, right? Like let's say sales, marketing, branding, and let's say what do you say, people who generate documents, right? They can start using LLMs. In fact, people are using, I think, ChatGPT, as you mentioned already. The disruption is already there. And
Right.
then artificial general intelligence is where you are seeing that a lot of investment is happening. Uh, Big break will come there also. And also you mentioned software development, of course, Copilot and Code Whisperer. Many software developers are already using. They are integrating it with their
Right.
IDE all and getting code, recommendation. In fact, I also know that you can write unit tests also using those, you know, um, correct. So it has actually eased the work of software developers, maybe with some challenges also. Uh, I think let's go into the bit of a specific. Can you explain like how exactly is the architecture of large language models? So how how uh, how is it different from traditional tools and technologies, let's say machine language models or neural networks, right? Because they were also pretty advanced. So what is
Mhm.
the structural difference when it comes to large language models?
Okay. So when you talk about so it's not a difference. Okay, how I would put it. Let's think of a Venn diagram, right? Now on the outer side you have your AI or your artificial intelligence, which is basically a system that is trying to mimic your human intelligence. And inside that, what you have is deep learning. Right? Deep learning is nothing but again the same thing using neural networks. So neural networks is able to kind of identify complex patterns out of it, and then generative AI is again a subset. So AI you have deep learning is a subset, and generative AI is again a subset of deep learning now, where it is more focused on things like generating of content. Let's say just like how we have seen in ChatGPT, it's basically you generate a text content, or in case of stable diffusion, it kind of generates images. There are also audio-based models where you can generate audio. Right? Generative AI is finally a subset or a very specialized area of deep learning. That's how I would put it. And I think the interesting part that we have to look here is how things have evolved, right? So specifically when we take NLP, so like initially you had the bag of words, where you had a lot of words, but then there was no contextual meaning inside that. Then came your things like maybe initially, if you have tried building some chatbots before all this transformer era, then you would have used word to vector or cloud, right? So this brought in sort of a contextual meaning. Hey, cat is an animal. So kind of brought in a contextual meaning into the play. Then you had your RNN and LSTMs, which were neural network based solution. So RNN actually had some issues, typically with understanding the contextual meaning when there was a long text, which LSTMs kind of tried to identify. Now where we are is the transformer based architecture. So in 2017, we have the paper "Attention is All You Need" that came out, in which it was they deeply discussed the transformer architecture. How it's significantly different from the rest is that it is able to do parallel processing. That is, it is able to understand the text as its own, while your typical RNN or LSTM kind of process towards one by one. So this brought in a lot of speed and optimization into the picture. And of course, your LLMs are trained on massive scale of data, as you can, like 7 billion parameters, and trillions of tokens, right? And another important aspect is the self-attention and the positional encoding, right? These are two more improvements that was brought in, because of which it was able to understand the meanings between words even when there was a long text, and then it was able to generate text based on that. So I think in comparison to your traditional models, LLMs are like a big step or a big leap forward. And I think that is how I would classify it. And this is the architecture.
Okay, so what I understand is like LLMs are not just a small incremental change in architecture. They are pretty different actually if you think about it. In a way, neural networks, what they were trying to do is they were trying to mimic how your brain works, how your neurons work, right? How they pass information and they kind of they used to do all the calculation based on that. And what LLMs are doing, large language models are doing, they are even more specialized. They already know how your brain works. Now they are passing a lot of data into that, and using the transformer architecture, as you mentioned, they are also able to parallelly process huge amounts of information, which means they will be way more faster than your general, I mean, neural networks, like you mentioned, right? Recurring
Yeah.
uh,
So these are also
RNN and
neural.
LSTM.
Yeah.
Right.
The transformer architecture is also neural networks. So as I said, the
Okay.
generative AI is a subset of deep learning. So we are not moving away
Right.
from neural networks, just that it has
They're just specializing.
specialized layers inside, let's say the self-attention layer and your positional encoding layer and multi-head self-attention. There are various layers inside the same neural
Right.
network that enhances it in comparison to your previous neural network models like your RNNs or LSTMs.
Basically, the computer is becoming way more closer to way how human mind works because of this LLM. Neural networks were already a milestone. Now they are almost kind of taking a big leap on how human mind actually the processes language, the written language or the language which is spoken, and kind of starts thinking and giving responses like a human being.
Right. And there are maybe slightly, I would digress on the thinking part. So we are working towards actually the logical based thinking. Now it's more statistical based result generation. We are just generating the result. The thinking aspect of it is something like the reasoning models. Maybe you would have seen. Maybe we can. That is a deeper topic. But yeah, you kind
Mm.
of summarized it.
Oh, it sounds like a very interesting architecture, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it's only going to go. It will be optimized even more, and it will kind of near more and more perfection in the future. And it is already handling, I think, text generation, and as you mentioned, right, using technologies like stable diffusion and all. You can also generate images already. So
Right.
maybe kind of it's not far to see a lot of videos getting all the way, from the scratch to the conception to the conclusion. They will be generated by AI. All those things will also going to happen very soon, I guess.
Right.
Right. Arun, I think the next question that I wanted to ask is like, one thing about LLMs is there are LLMs like ChatGPT itself is a LLM based application, right? And there are many open source LLMs also, right? These days in the on the internet we can browse and see, right?
Right.
And you can also generate your own large language model LLM, right? By writing code and ingesting a lot of data into it, that is feeding a lot of information inside it.
Okay.
Do you think organizations should start thinking about creating their own LLMs, or they should use open source LLMs or LLMs like ChatGPT if they want to get started with implementing some business use cases?
Yeah. So one, it is a very subjective question. Maybe let me not put it as a subjective question. So, what is maybe if you are a first-time founder or a startup or maybe a big MNC organization, right? So, the decision to develop an in-house LLM actually should come from what is the need of your organization. Do you have the resources? Do you have the investment? Is that part of your strategic goal? Right? These are the things that it should actually help you make that decision whether you have to build an LLM in-house. Yeah, you are right. We have a lot of proprietary softwares like our ChatGPT or Claude, and then the plethora of open source models that you can download from Hugging Face, like your Llama, Mistral, Falcon, Fee models, right? DeepSeek. So all these models are out there, which is available for you to download and use it completely for free. Now, let me try to address the question: when does it actually make sense to build your own LLM? Let's say that you are trying to work on a niche market. Let's say in case of India, if you want to try to solve a unique problem, which could be LLMs for ethnic languages. Recently, I think Ola Trim 2 it got released for a lot of Indian languages. I think a Gemma model was there for 150 other ethnic languages. So these are some models that is trying to fill the gap with respect to ethnic languages. Then the other use case where maybe you would want to try and build your own LLM would be like the architectural innovation, right? Let's say your memory efficiency, inference speed, and or let's say you are able to reduce the compute cost, like how we have seen in case of DeepSeek. So those are other areas where maybe you want to push for your creating your own LLM. And otherwise, maybe let's say your data is it's so private data, it is not available in the internet, and there is a lot of compliance issues. Maybe that is also another area where maybe you would probably look at creating an LLM from scratch. But mind you, creating even a small model like Llama 1 billion parameter requires about, uh, I think it was about 350,000 GPU hours, which is extremely costly. Cost. That is the one important thing that you will have to keep in mind when you have to decide, and also a couple of areas we have just discussed. Now, when does it make sense to use some of the open source models or even some of the proprietary models, right? If, as part of your organization, all you want to build is applications on top of your LLMs, right? Just like how we talked about maybe content generation or financial markets in the beginning, if you all your focused is on building applications on top of your LLM, that is when you can leverage either your proprietary solutions like ChatGPT, or you could potentially host your own private LLM. If there is something to do with data you don't want to give it to an proprietary solution, then you could even host open source models. There are fine-tuned models which is also available maybe for tasks like text to SQL and stuff like that, which you could bring in to the picture. So I think that is another area that you can explore, especially Hugging Face. It has a lot of models to be explored, and if you can use it to build your own application. And one more thing, I think just I wanted to touch upon this. Let's say you have this niche use case that you want to target, and you feel it's a great thing, and you are actually looking for funding. I think our recently there was this news about around 10,000 crore of investment that has been as part of our budget. I think it was the India AI mission, right? So there is a lot of effort that is going in terms of acquiring GPUs, creating data sets for India and Indian languages, uh, even creating LLMs specifically coming out from India, right? So, in order to promote all of that and a lot of other strategic partnerships, upskilling and stuff, there is about, I think, 10,000 crores. Maybe definitely founders would try to tap into that and then look forward to it. So, just to summarize, don't create an LLM just for the heck of it. Have the right use case for you. But if you're mainly focused on applications, try to go with an enterprise or try to go with a private LLM. That's
So basically, what I understand is it is a discussion. Sorry, it's a decision that is dependent on the cost. If you want to build your LLM, you will have to pay some cost upon. You will have to make some investments. First, you kind of be very sure that you actually need to invest so much. If your business use case is something which can be easily served using an open source LLM, probably you should use that, because building that on your own will require, first of all, it will require a development cost. Then it will require hardware cost that as you mentioned, GPUs and all, and may not be a good idea when you are just kind of experimenting with it. Probably you should go with some open source LLMs which are easily available, and then once you reach certain stage, or once you have such kind of use cases where it makes sense, then only make such kind of heavy investment. Okay, cool. I think one more area that is of concern regarding LLMs is the fine tuning of LLMs, right? Because as we just discussed, right, LLMs can be very expensive and they have billions of parameters. Creating an LLM is a pretty exhausting exercise. And then if the LLM is so huge that you cannot kind of run it on your infra, then again you will have to spend a lot of money on that, right? So
right.
so how can we fine tune the LLMs so that you can kind of save on all these aspects of development of LLM?
Uh, right. So fine tuning, yeah. So fine tuning of LLM is definitely a much better approach than building your LLM from scratch, because it will use far less resources than your typical building an entire model from scratch, right? So as I was just mentioning earlier, like text to SQL is one use case that we were actually working on, and then you could potentially fine tune it with your custom tables and data sets, and then you can have a model out of it. For again, if you're having some data, which is like earlier also we mentioned about compliance and domain specific data, right? So in order to make the existing LLMs work with your domain specific data or some domain specific task, right? You can go with an approach of fine tuning. And even in approaches of fine, there are several approaches of fine tuning. There is prompt tuning or soft prompt tuning, which is like I think the least costly. Then you have the most popular approach using the supervised fine tuning, uh, and the PEFT, which is the parameter efficient fine tuning, in which there are again aspects like LoRa, QLoRa. Uh, we could potentially go. So it then yeah, definitely the reinforcement based fine tuning. So I think that is in its podcast of its own, all the different fine tuning approaches. But how I would say is yes, it is definitely much more cost efficient than building an LLM from scratch. What you want to use it, or which sort of fine tuning you want to use it. If you're a beginner, you want to get started with, let's say, you have a use case to create a chatbot. Maybe you can use an existing LLM which is already pre-trained on a question answering chatbot. Or let's say you want to try out how fine tuning works. Then what I would say is there is plenty of material available on the supervised fine tuning on Hugging Face. You can use that, try it out on something like SageMaker, see whether it is able to adapt to your domain specific data and then work with it.
Sure. So what I understand is like you take an LLM which is ready made, and then you just to kind of fine tune it with some of specific data that is kind of required in your particular use cases. And so LLM will become capable of answering way more question related to your domain just because of that small fine tuning effort that you put. And fine tuning is a topic in its own. There are many deep concepts. I think very very technical concepts that you will need to understand. As you mentioned, parameter efficient fine tuning, that is PEF, and inside PEF there is LoRa and something. Okay, okay, cool. So I think supervised fine tuning is what all the developers should take note of. If you are starting with fine tuning, start with that, and maybe you will get good results, and then you can go kind of apply more advanced techniques like PEFT and LoRa and other mentioned by Arun. Okay, very interesting, Arun. I think this LLM word is right, kind of the generative API. It has opened doors to many new technologies and many new techniques which were kind of people were not aware, right? Even machine learning when it came, right, it brought a lot of these things, and particularly with neural networks. But what was missing was feeding a lot of information in those models with language-based technologies, right? LLM-based technologies. I think you can feed huge amount of information to it very easily because you can just put a lot of documents, PDFs, Word documents, and every organization, even on internet, has huge amount of data that is easily available. Sometimes it may be structured, sometimes it may be unstructured, but since that data is available, you can kind of use that to fine tune. And earlier what used to happen is, because if I remember from my own experience, right, if you want to do some kind of NLP or something, you will have to write a lot of grammar rules, lot of sentiment analysis, right, using machine language learning models and all. But now you don't need to do all that. You just feed the data to the LLM and it will automatically do
Yeah,
all of that, right? So
summarization, named
uh,
entity recognition, everything. Kind of, yeah, it's
correct.
able to do it. Yeah.
All those things are not needed anymore, I think, right? LLMs will handle everything
Yeah.
in a way. Of course, it's a generalization, but lot of struggle. So in a way, technology is
Costs.
getting very advanced, but the
Yeah.
interface, right, to use the technology is
Use
becoming kind of
is
easier, I guess, right?
yeah, it has become a
Okay.
lot more easier. Yeah.
But tell me one thing: how will the organizations control the cost of creating, let's say, a business use case, implementing a business use case using LLMs? Because as you mentioned, right, there is fine tuning, there is creation of LLMs, and there are costs associated with every aspect, right? Even running an LLM,
Right.
right? How
Right.
can
Right. Right.
organizations approach the cost aspect of it?
See, now that you've rightly mentioned, right? We can use LLMs for a lot of use case. So I will try, and if it is regarding creating applications, maybe I'll try to address that. So as we have discussed, building an LLM from scratch is really really expensive. Fine tuning is also expensive. I'm not going to say that it's cheap. Fine tuning in itself is also an expensive approach. You still need the GPUs for it. From an organization's perspective, who wants to maybe, let's say, create a chat based use case, or let's say they want to leverage an existing LLM. Let's say, gets take that as a fact. They want to utilize an existing LLM, but they don't want to take the path of fine tuning or building it. Then, from a cost optimization perspective, I think there are different approaches that you could take. The cheapest way to build is something called as prompt engineering, which is nothing but when you are sending a request to the LLM to get a particular response, maybe you can give it a few examples, right? Hey, I want this question. This is my question. This is the context. I want the answer to be maybe structured in this particular way. Give me a heading, give me a content, give me this, or maybe I want the answer to be structured like a JSON with these particular K values. Where you can give these examples in your prompt, send it to the LLM, and then the LLM would generate the response in that particular fashion. So this is one way. This is the cheapest way in which how you can leverage existing LLMs. Then here also there are multiple prompt engineering techniques, like as I said, giving an example, which is called the few shot prompting. Or there is an example called as chain of thought prompting, where you tell it, hey, you have to think in this way, maybe solving A into B into C into D, or let's say some A to the power of 5 is basically multiplying it like this. So you give it that particular chain of thought. So these are the different ways in which you can do prompt engineering. There are a lot of other ways also. I think there are dedicated papers out there. The other way, let's say prompt engineering is not working for you, the next set of, I think, the less costly approach for you would be like building a RAG. A RAG is nothing but retrieval augmented generation. Here, let's say you have your company data. You were talking about having a lot of enterprise data, right? You feed this data into a vector database where all these documents are stored as embeddings. And then you kind of create a system where, let's say, you are getting a question, you query this embedding database. Hey, give me the documents that is relevant to my query. And then with this query, then you send that to the LLM and then say, hey, this is my question. These are the set of documents or chunks that is relevant to my question. Now, based on this, give me an answer. So this is RAG. And the other approach that you can, let's say, you have a lot of steps involved. Maybe you have to read something, you have to send out an email, or maybe you need to search the internet. Then you get to create a code, write a code, task specific, workflow specific and task specific use cases. For this, you can again work on something called as an agentic AI framework, which I think right now, if you take LinkedIn, it's there everywhere, right?
Right.
So these are some approaches of building applications over LLM. Thereby, you are reducing as a AI application first company or an applied AI based company. You are just focused on creating applications out of this LLM, and then you can use any of these techniques to get the best result out of that LLM. Now, other ways in which you can potentially, let's say, maybe you don't want to depend on a proprietary thing like ChatGPT, right? Then, in that case, the other way for you is to deploy your own open source private model, like the Llama based model. Again, it is open source, you can deploy it. There also, you can potentially save by by deploying like a 4-bit or a 8-bit. So these are called as quantized models. They have less precision, so it is smaller, consumes lesser memory. So it is from a compute perspective is way much more cheaper. Then there are other techniques also like VLLM, which does batch inference and then it optimizes the memory. So there are different deployment techniques if you really want to deploy a private LLM and not depend on a proprietary LLM. I think these are the different ways in which organization could potentially look at saving cost. So first identify a use case, see whether you want to, it's a very proprietary data, you don't, whether you want to depend on ChatGPT or not. If you can depend on ChatGPT, focus on prompt engineering, RAG or agentic AI. Even let's say instead of ChatGPT, if you want to use private LLM, maybe focus on quantization and again apply the same techniques of prompt engineering, RAG or agentic AI on the private LLMs. So by this, you could significantly reduce your cost than building a entire LLM from scratch or from fine tuning an LLM. I think this is what I would recommend.
Okay, cool. So understood. I think again, cost optimization is something where all the founders and the developers will need to put some head, because also there are many options. As Arun mentioned, you can do RAG, which is like putting a where clause in queries, where you will say don't query the entire data, query only this much amount of data. And then, as you mentioned, a lot of compute and memory optimization techniques are there, which again you can use to kind of control the hardware cost. And also you can do the simple prompt engineering. That is where you give a lot of prompts to the, just like we prompt in chat gpt, right? We give some kind of questions and chat gpt gives response. Those are the questions, the prompts which you are giving. You can give some examples to the LLM, like for example, if you are doing sentiment analysis, you give 5 examples, like for this kind of paragraph, this is the response I want. And then when you give the actual question, it will start giving responses in that particular format, as you said, in JSON, in whatever format you want. So that's very interesting, actually. I mean, a lot of work with software developers used to do can be reduced by using those kind of techniques. And yes, I think if you spend some time, you will be able to control the cost to an extent, at least, right? When you
Definitely.
are starting
Yes.
the use of LLMs. Okay, that's very interesting, Arun. I think it was very challenging discussion in a way, because there are too many concepts, and I think people who are watching this, they must have got some kind of guidance on where to get started with, and then they can go and research and find out about these topics more deeply. Any starting resources you would like to mention where they should get started? Let's say a founder is there, right, who is creating a startup, AI based startup, let's say agentic AI, or LLM based. What are some of the resources where they should start to learn about these things in a structured way, and without, because there's too much information on the internet and you can go haywire, right? So if
Right,
someone
right,
has to
right.
start, where should they start?
Um, I think one depends. Let's say again, if you just want to start building applied AI based applications, then to get quickly started with, maybe LangChain is one solution that you can go with. But from a production scenario, maybe you don't want to take that line. But yeah, quickly getting started prototyping, use LangChain. When you are in a production based system, just think about it. There are then there are solutions like, let's say you want to build an agentic AI, then again, there are solutions of AutoGen, Crew.ai. I think Crew AI is something that you can quickly start with. Then you have LangGraph. Or if you really want to explore what the world of private LLMs, then I would say go to Hugging Face. Hugging Face has a lot of articles about. It could be overwhelming, but again, just get started with it. Get started about some of the articles. Start reading about it. Uh, I think, yeah, those could be. Then definitely in YouTube also you have plenty. For me, it has been from experience. Let's say this is a use case. Try to tackle that.
Okay.
I even, let's say, applied AI. I started with LangChain. Now I'm slightly moving away from it. I because of personal reasons, but it may not be applicable to everyone. Yeah. So Hugging Face again, beautiful resource. And if you really want to use OpenAI again, LangChain documentation or the OpenAI documentation in itself, you can directly start using those APIs on the go. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, understood, Arun. Thank you for that. So Arun, it was a great discussion. Thanks for coming to the podcast
Yeah.
and kind of educating us all on how we can start using large language models. Thank you for joining here.
Thank you, Pradeep. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
uh, to all the viewers, please do subscribe to this channel for many such amazing discussions lined up. And also, happy Holi to all of you. Thank you. Have a nice day.